you're listening to the Neil Lamptey Show. My name's Joey, and I'm joined by Neil.
Yes, hello.
And able deputy for Paul, who is absent this week, is Dominic, with us for the full show. Thanks for coming on.
It's good to be on the show.
Question for Neil, specifically to start off. You and I this week weren't at Yeovil, but through the magic of iFollow, we were able to watch the game in full by a camera that moves left and right like you're watching Pong.
Yeah.
Question is, if you were offered the chance to get that hour and a half of your life back, what would you do with it?
You're asking the wrong person. Quite enjoy it. It's weird. Which is weird because it wasn't an enjoyable game, but something about having the ability to see everything, which is strange to share because I've not got a season ticket, and yet I've not missed a minute of Coventry City this season. Wrong, really, isn't it?
Well, no, I ditched the old iPlayer thing or whatever it was called a few years ago because I didn't listen to games very often. And then when this came out this season, it was like, yeah, you can watch all 90 minutes of every game. I was like, well, that's amazing. It's an amazing thing, isn't it, for like £4 a month. Dominic, I imagine you've watched every 90 minutes of every Football League game that's been played so far.
I haven't quite made it to that extent of obsession yet, but I did end up watching extended highlights of Colchester's match at the weekend for some reason.
Wow,
so
really?
I can tell you a lot about Colchester.
We might save that for when we play them, assuming that we're in the same league as them, which I really can't ever remember at the moment.
Yeah, we loaned Kyle Reid to them.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes, that big step up, Kyle. Well done.
Yeah. He really won out of that situation. Moments of the week then. Neil, kick us off.
Yeah, I went to the Shrewsbury game in midweek, and the first half was appalling, and it was just some sort of non-event. And then, out of nowhere, the second half became one of the most enjoyable halves of football I've seen in a long time. And not even necessarily for the fact that we came back, which that was good, but also it became like a fun event, and Tony scored, and that made me happy. And actually, also behind me, there was this kid who must have been about 6 or 7. He was the most cogent 6 and 7-year-old I've ever heard in my life. He was talking so much sense. He was explaining things to his dad. He was talking about the difference between diving in the Premiership and in our league. And I looked round, and he literally was just out of toddlerhood. And it was fantastic. That was good. But yeah, my moment of the week was just that second half and Tony's goal in particular, which was especially pleasing.
I am not overly bothered about the result in that game. What bothered me was how dismal the first half sounded, because I must confess I only listened to the game, and that we seemed to pull so heavily back into it. I would have, because it's that stupid cup that we were all so happy about winning last season.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
That I wasn't that bothered about it, and had we have played well and lost 1-0, I don't think I'd have been overly arsed. My worry at the minute is us not playing well, but I'm really happy that we pulled right back into it. Dom, did you go?
No, but I found out you could watch it on iPhoto, so I did that the day afterwards.
Could you?
Yeah. So, it was a bit of a strange one watching it back and obviously knowing the result. So you're obviously sort of trying to figure out what went on. And sort of my feelings on it was that sort of in the first half, we were sort of kind of abject, but sort of in a way where kind of felt we were almost sitting off or playing within ourselves. And then I'm not particularly sure Shrewsbury really did enough to score 2 goals. But then in the second half, we improved, but not to the extent that we should have scored 2 goals back. It was just not a game. I imagine part of that's down to that competition.
The whole start to the season has been very odd, but I should imagine it's probably a consequence of signing 13 players and them trying to find their feet and everything, hasn't it? At no point has anything seemed... The results have been really up and down, but the performances seem to have been quite flat from what I've seen. It doesn't seem to be any cause for huge alarm, nor for any great rejoicing. But people don't like that, do they? It has to ideally be one of the two.
Yeah.
Dom,
the other night was really was really confusing because so now you're saying that you could watch it on iFollow, which I didn't think you could because it wasn't a league match. But also after the game, all the interviews were taking place in front of a Carabao Cup board, with all that sponsorship on there. So I'm very confused at the moment in time. They're mixing up competitions and they're confusing me. Yeah, bad.
Yeah, bad boys. Dom, moment of the week.
I'm going to go for the moment yesterday afternoon, transfer deadline day, when it seemed like we really were going to sign Cole Baker, because just throughout the window, there'd been talk of it happening, and I was like, oh, is this really going to happen, or is this just sort of fanciful thinking? And then he was released, I was like, crap, this is actually going to happen now. And I was, even though I'm sort of ambivalent in my own feelings towards Cole Baker, it's just like the reaction he has from the fans. It would have been such a massive boost, not just because I do think he is the kind of player we needed right now, just someone who can sort of drive from midfield, but it just would have been a massive boost, and it was just sort of a little gutting how it sort of peaked out in the end. It was like, oh, he might go to India, that's it then.
Has he gone anywhere?
Not yet, but...
So does that mean we can still have him?
Well, no, because he's still under contract from Portsmouth.
Oh, I thought they cancelled his contract. Oh,
right. No, I think he's still there, isn't he?
No, he got released yesterday.
Oh, he got released yesterday. Oh, I see. Okay. But then maybe, I guess, if he's a free agent, presumably we can.
Well, he tweeted he's moving on to a new challenge, and Robin said today that he's not going to sign Cole Baker. So
fairly strong messaging there. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sick of Matt Robbins being so cryptic. I'm gonna go for a slightly left field one, which was the mad anti-Duckens Nazon stuff going on Twitter today. That was from one, lunkhead. The reason it's the moment of the week for me is I was really heartened to see the sort of huge support that he got. So for anybody that was not aware, he tweeted something along the lines of Eid Mubarak, but that in presumably a different language. You could tell it was close enough. And someone who appeared to be someone on Twitter, which obviously it doesn't really exist, is someone who looked to be a Liverpool fan in Sutton, told him that that he should delete the tweet and that he shouldn't be playing for Coventry City if he was a Muslim. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it was actually more direct what he put. I'm just not quoting it literally. And then Nazon, bear in mind, I think he's 18, isn't he?
No, he's about 23.
Oh, is he older than that?
Yeah.
I thought he was only a bambino, but even still, it's quite a young lad. His response was to say, I think it's a shame and, each to their own kind of thing. He was quite an adult about his response. But then it was I think the temptation is to assume that everyone in the world is crazy and, anti-Islamic and everything. But actually, the vast majority of people that came back were all really supportive and really good. And it's horrible that there's an element of the internet that's so negative and bigoted. But I was pleased to see a sort of football community rabble round as quickly as they did and as vocally as they did to support him. For a number of reasons. One, because you should. Secondly, he's a young lad, and it took me back a little bit. I just thought I think there's a long, long way to go, and this podcast isn't the social justice hour. but I did think it was a nice thing to see. And I think of football especially as being so set in its ways and in the past to some extent. But I thought it was a nice thing to happen, even if it did have to come out of something so vile.
Yeah, that completely passed me by, actually. I presume this person has the same issues with other Coventry heroes in the past who have been Muslim. We've had plenty, haven't we?
Chippo, Hadji, Reedy Johnson.
Hadji, Mo Cognac.
Mo Cognac, yeah.
Reedy Johnson, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah. I just think it's none of anybody's fucking business.
Exactly. Get a grip.
On to things that are our business. The performance against Yeovil, Neil. I watched it, as I said, on iFollow. It's a very strange way to follow a game. My question to you is, how much do you think that they won on physicality?
I'm not sure that was particularly it. I think there were areas in the pitch where they were more dominant due to their physicality. So I think the wide areas in particular, they had some proper athletes against our guys, and they did show us up. I mean, they won because we gave away a daft goal at a daft time, which kind of turned out sort of the game on its head a little bit, and then given their due, the second goal was it was a nice finish. But yeah, I'm not so sure physicality was the issue more than our own lack of sort of creativity and just idea in the second half, because I feel like we started well. We started as the dominant team. We kept the ball nicely. We didn't create anything particularly sort of noteworthy, but we were still looking like there were gaps for us to exploit. And then it just kind of turned around once that ridiculous mistake from the keeper again. We didn't know how to deal with that. We didn't know how to deal, having been the more dominant team, to going behind, which isn't abnormal in football. This happens a lot. It's a normal thing to happen, and you should, if you have any ambitions of being a good team in the league you're in, be able to deal with it. But that concerned me more than anything else, really, just how we kind of, rather than just continuing in the same way. I mean, we didn't need to rush. They scored in the first half. There's plenty of time for us to continue playing the way we were. I felt like we didn't. I felt like we soon lost our idea. And the other thing that concerns me is kind of this sort of benign attack that we have, where we have good players and tidy, neat players. So people like McNulty, who I think by himself is a neat, tidy player, and he does things by himself nice. But I don't feel like that. He needs someone pretty impactful. I don't know if impactful is actually a word, but someone up front who's going to work with him and give him better opportunities, which is why Nason on the wing as a sort of a big point for me is a big no-no. I just feel like if we're going to do anything with Nason, we need to make sure we play in a position where we can get the best out of him, because he seems to do well when he's on the ball, but I want him to do well when he's closer to goal. I don't want all his good work happening on the side of the pitch, which is what it seemed to happen at the weekend.
My only fear with that, and that I've seen less of him than you have, and I think we should probably say, I can't tell sometimes whether people think we're being totally serious when we bang on about a player like Nason. It's just a bit of fun, isn't it? We don't think he's God yet. The only thing is that he was the main player who was dragging us forward, I felt, against Yeovil. And it's a difficult situation sometimes, because I think it looked like he would be best served playing on the shoulder and dragging a team out and using his pace in that way. But on the other hand, it did seem like the only connection between midfield and getting the ball up did tend to be him. Jones to a slightly lesser extent.
Yeah, I think what it does, if anything, is showcase probably the one thing that we're missing from the squad, and the one thing that I really hoped we would get in the transfer window, which was another genuine winger. You know, an actual winger. So rather than using, I said genuine for a laugh there. I don't actually say it like that. People, if you listen, that's not.
That's fine.
But we need a winger. So we've got Jody Jones, who plays, and I prefer Jody Jones on the right. That's controversial in many ways, but I prefer him on the right, and I want another winger on the left hand side just to offer that balance and that kind of confusion to the opposition, so they don't have to continually focus on kind of just one person. And while I like Nason as a player, and I think, like you say, he did join things well in the attack, I think what we're doing is it's almost a hindrance to the team. So I think wherever you play him, he's going to play well by himself and he'll do good stuff. I just feel like as a team we could be even better with him up front, doing his thing up front, and then having an actual winger on the right hand side or left hand side. So you've got Jody Jones, another winger, Nason up front, and someone alongside him accompanying him. So then suddenly you've got a proper sort of mix of qualities there. Whereas if you put Nason on the right, it's almost like we're putting him there because we simply don't have anybody else to play in that position to the same level. And it's almost like, now I don't play FIFA that much, but you see those people who play Ultimate Team, and there's that sort of connection between positions and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like by putting him in that position, he's still going to be a good player, but his ratings come down. He's not like the full green that you'd normally see around him. Whereas you put him up front, he'll be his absolute most comfortable. Or Football Manager, like when you see players in their right positions, you put them at left back and they're all yellow and stuff. I feel like on the right hand side, Nazon is still capable of playing that position, but we don't get the best out of him. Right? And that's a gap for me. I don't know what you guys think. I mean, I don't want to go onto that discussion just yet, but as far as that game went, he played well, but I really felt like he could have done a lot more up front.
I mean, Dom, Nazon, thoughts?
Yeah, what really impressed me about Nazon, and especially the first couple of games when he was playing through the middle, was, he's this sort of really sort of ostentatious, skillful player who has every right to be selfish, but in the first couple of games he just showed a really good awareness to try and pick out teammates. I remember that goal he scored against Blackburn, and the move starts from him playing sort of an outside of the boot pass out from Keddy Evans. The ball's crossed in, Grimmer has a shot, and then he followed it in and went mental. But yeah, even like when he came on against Notts County, he got that assist for Jones. And I remember one of the very first things he did against Notts County was drive through the middle and then play sort of an outside of the boot pass to Jones, which I think went out in the end. But he's more than just sort of this skillful player who's sort of trying to make himself look good. He's got an awareness about his game that has really impressed me. I think he's best served in the middle, probably just playing off the strikers with sort of quicker players around him.
Neil, do you want to pick it up from there, the rest of the Yeovil game?
Yeah, like I say, the mistake from the keeper, felt like a turning point for me. It's a call now for Robbins, because one mistake in a game happens. I think most of us are happy to say, you made a mistake, fair enough, that could happen to anybody. For it to happen in the second game, another clear goalkeeping error, what we've got now is a situation where there's almost too much focus on him. And while it might be a tricky decision for Robbins, at the same time, maybe the best thing to do is just to completely remove that potential for that focus at all, because it was clearly his mistake. It was almost an anxiety to be composed and be sort of controlling as a goalkeeper, and he came flying out. And actually what he did was the opposite. He wasn't composed. He made a bad decision too early. He got in the way. I think Stokes would have got rid of it, no problem really. And it was poor timing, if anything, just because we didn't need that. We were looking the better team, I would have thought, and it knocked us, and we then had to, for some reason, find a new way to deal with that match, which wasn't what we needed really. We're having lost the previous game. What we needed was just sort of just to continue playing, feeling a bit more confident about ourselves, and that knocked the whole sort of style of the match really. And second half, and that was the one that I focused on more when I was watching that was frustrating, because we really did. We kind of lacked the intensity to make it happen. So whereas in the previous away performance against someone please help me, who did we beat? Grimsby. Yes, that was an intense second half, and you had players like Kelly in the midfield just snapping at the heels, really getting at the players and making things happen. Whereas the Yeovil one wasn't quite the same. It became a going through the motions sort of performance where the players were doing things reasonably well. They were making mistakes left, right, and centre, but we seem to be doing that in every game. But there was just no sort of desire. I get that's the only word I can think of. Desire to actually make things happen and turn the game on its head. And the other thing that I've noticed, especially when I'm seeing Andrew, where again he's a good player. Watching him in isolation, he's a good player, but we need him facing the goal. And what we had then was Andrew with this back to goal most of the game, and not really being able to use his sort of vision in any way. And it was kind of a waste for him in that match as well. And what happened was we just ended up running out of ideas, and the game almost just petered out. The second goal killed it for us, because before that goal we'd lost our way anyway. And then the second goal was pretty much the nail in the coffin, and I could see no way that we would kind of change the way we were playing. And it just, I think that was probably, of all the things that happened in that match, what was most disappointing was just the way that there was no real sign that we were going to come back into it. Now, I know Robbins after the game was frustrated that we didn't get a penalty, and he felt like there were sort of decisions that went against us. And when I watched back and tried to be more analytical about it, there was obviously a lot of reason behind why he was saying that, and it wasn't quite the poor performance that we all thought when it's so emotional. But I think the one thing that he missed, and he kind of maybe just doesn't want to say this, but what there was lacking was sort of just that belief and kind of directness to actually make something happen and actually change the course of the game. And it was just disappointing because obviously you've got a load of fans going down there, and it's a real rotten journey. I mean, I've done it before in a coach and stuff, and it's just
remind us of your terrible journey.
Oh, it was the first game back, wasn't it, in League One? And there was a lot of coaches that day. We were all really, pumped up for our League One tour, and we got the broken coach. We got the one with no aircon, and it was the hottest day of the year. All my confectionery melted, which was so annoying. My crunchy was just gone, and then me and my friend got very badly burned. You just don't expect to burn at a football match, do you?
It was hot, weren't it? It was really hot, yeah.
And my most favourite moment of that game was actually, I took one solitary photo. It's just looking out onto the pitch. And in the bottom right-hand corner, I have you and Paul Knowles staring back at me, just looking at me. And I don't know if you've even seen this photo to this day, but I don't think I've met you once before. And it was just very odd to find the two faces literally staring at me as I took this photo. I don't know if you knew I was there or what, but it's quite an iconic Lamptey photo, that one, actually.
Yeah. I don't even remember Paul being there. Anyway, I feel like we've digressed a little bit at my behest. I wanted to, unless you've got anything else that you were desperate to talk about, I wanted to ask you about McNulty's performance.
Yeah, I mean, I used the word neat and tidy about him quite a lot, and I think one thing I try to do, I'm very sort of obsessed with removing emotion from my analysis and kind of just focusing on the individuals and what they actually bring to the team. And when I watched it back and focused on the things he did with the ball, in the second half, he actually did a lot of nice, neat touches, good quality passing, first-time touches to his teammates. So I think when he kind of leaves the pitch, he will feel himself like he's made a good contribution to the game. Sometimes I wonder, though, whether that is still good for us as a team, whether just because he's having a good performance by himself, actually the kind of player he is actually worthwhile for us in that system. So while he's neat and tidy, I didn't feel like he had much of an impact, and it's kind of been him throughout the season, I would have thought. I mean, I can't think of too many games where, aside from maybe Grimsby, he had some good touches. I think if he even played that game, I can't ignore this whole portion on racking my brains as I'm saying it. But I just think it's a very odd one, and I've said this in the past about other players where I feel like even Ben Stevenson's a great example of a player where you watch him, and if you just spent the game watching Ben Stevenson, you'd think, God, this guy is good. But then you consider sometimes his impact with players around him and his interaction with players around him, and whether it's actually useful for the team dynamic or not. And that was my concern with McNulty, really. I just feel like up front we need someone who's going to cause their defence some real issues, and a neat and tidy footballer isn't always someone who's going to cause them issues. They'll happily take that all day long.
I've got a professor sort of a specific interest in this, in that because I've spent all summer hearing people saying he's going to score 20 goals, and that really annoys me when I know that nobody's ever seen him before. That it put my back up, and it unfairly sets me on like a prejudiced start off when sort of looking at him, because I'm waiting to go, oh, is that your 20 season goal striker? Put those words into a sentence. And so I actually did focus on him quite a lot against Yeovil, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And I would say objectively, the thing that seemed to be lacking from him was just what looked like a real desperation to score that led itself into him really badly snatching at chances.
Yeah, that's fair.
One moment in the first half where he takes a long ball down just on the edge of the area on the side of his foot and has a snapshot straight away. The control to bring it down is like really, really special. It's really, really good. And just the touch alone, one, he stops it dead, and he stops it dead in such a way that he creates a yard of space for himself because nobody's expecting him to take it down on the side of his foot. But he shoots as soon as he gets it down, and you think, it's such a shame that you've made all that space for yourself in the centre of the goal, like a perfect shooting position. You could have taken a touch forward and been on the penalty spot, and he just grabbed at it. And I think there's hopefully the penalty on Tuesday night and possibly a goal from open play that isn't a weird Nathan Clark assist. Hopefully maybe he's one of them players that just needs to get a few goals and then he'll calm down and be okay. Because I think there is some value in him, but I am worried that you've hit the nail on the head very astutely, and I think we might have talked about this about Biamu, I just can't quite tell what he is, and I like to see my strikers have a thing, and I don't think he has particularly. Dom, before we move on to Shrewsbury, do you want to give us a few thoughts on McNulty from what you've seen?
I wonder whether, sort of as mentioned earlier, we need a McNulty type striker, sort of playing that sort of almost lone striker role, or definitely the furthest forward striker role. It just seems in our system, the way Rollins has us set up, McNulty sort of running channels and sort of almost moving away from goal a bit too much. Whereas we signed someone who in the past has got a reputation at least as being more of a penalty area striker, and you want him in the penalty area getting on the end of stuff rather than having to sort of push out wide sort of and get moves going really. So we need to find a way to get him into more goal scoring positions, because I think sort of the sum total goal scoring positions he's been in over the first sort of 4 or 5 games, it's been relatively few.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Neil, did you have any final specific thoughts on Yeovil?
No, I say no and then immediately have a specific thought about Biamu. So he came on, and I think we've all spoken about his contributions thus far, which have been sort of fairly sort of few and far between. Yeah. What I would say about his performance when he came on the other day is he won every single header he went up for, which in a period of maybe 10 minutes was actually really impressive. And he won some very, very handy headers, and although they didn't lead to anything, I think as another one who, when they look at their own individual performance, he can look at himself and think, actually, yeah, I put in quite a decent sort of shift there for us, and that's also an option for us then. Whereas when we do become sort of desperate and unable to kind of create anything, knowing that he actually does have the ability to win headers in his locker, because we hadn't seen that in the previous games, but to win 7 in a row is no fluke, and he was up against a reasonably big centre-half as well. So, yeah, that was just another one, a point of interest, which means that at least then it just throws another option into the mix, and as long as he's kind of willing to be involved in that side of the game and actually throw himself into those headers, and that's something we can look out for as well, I think.
Yeah, and I asked you about the physical side of it. I thought they did have one over on us physically, and specifically that second goal comes from, I think it might be 3 consecutive back and forth long punts up and down the pitch, but they win all of them, and that's how the fella brings the ball down and then just storms past Kelly as if he wasn't there. I thought most of the game they were a bit bigger, and I think we had bemoaned Biamu as someone who didn't bring an extra edge, but maybe he can bring a bit of physicality. Let's hope so. Yeah,
we've kind of let players off for some poor performance. I thought Stokes had quite a poor game. On the other side, I thought Grimmer wasn't particularly.
I didn't.
He was hit and miss again. I mean, he shows some good moments, but then he just sort of regresses back into a really poor form of himself. And I thought Kelly as well had a fairly poor game as well. So there were performances in there which were below par and made for what was obviously a comfortable victory for them in the end, just through being unable to sort of combat them. So Stokes is the one I'd pick out probably more than anybody else, who disappointed me once more, which is a shame, because I always felt like he was the maniac in the defence who will actually engage whenever he needs to. But so far this season he's felt kind of timid, and that's not what we want from him.
No. I thought what we would do is have a brief transfer window chat to talk about the one in and the one out. and then we'll do a quick bit of Shrewsbury, and then we'll do a preview from there. So, Dom, I don't know whether you have any thoughts on either Reece Charles-Cook's departure, or is he called Tom Davies that we've signed?
Yep.
Thoughts on either?
Talk about Tom Davies? Okay. So, I mean, I haven't seen a great deal of him.
I don't even think his parents have seen a great deal of him, to be fair.
But I think his main sort of relevant experience was that he was part of quite a good Accrington Stanley team a couple of seasons ago who were playing excellent football at this level and were really unlucky not to win promotion. Obviously, had moved to Portsmouth, hasn't worked out. Their fans were very not nice about him. But sort of looking deeper at it, it seems like he was more sort of a physical type defender, and sort of Portsmouth style of play required defenders who could play out from the back, and he made quite a few high-profile errors with the ball at his feet last season. So, cause for optimism there.
And Reece Charles-Cook, I mean, it kind of made sense with three keepers there that one of them had to go. Would he have been the one that you would have actively tried to move out?
I think so, yes. I mean, obviously, only 18 months ago, I thought that not only had he had a great season, but he was possibly one of the better keepers in League One that season. I know he made a few big errors that season, but towards the end of that year, he really improved and kept us in some games. But last year was a massive step back. I mean, there was that Oldham game where he dropped that cross right onto a defender's head. I mean, even when Romans gave him a chance against Walsall in the final couple of games of last season, I thought it was obviously taking several steps back. He was struggling to claim crosses, and I just think he hasn't kicked on. He was one of three first-team keepers, so he was the odd one out.
I remember in the season that you're talking about where he did particularly well, which presumably was the Mowbray good first half of the season.
Yeah.
I remember saying to Paul an awful lot that January, the main thing I would have done would have been to have looked at an experienced keeper, because I thought that there was a good chance that might be the difference. But then I remember at the end of the season saying I was really wrong and that he really stepped up and improved his game.
He was the only one, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He came out of it really smelling the roses, even through the sort of the latter periods of that season. And Neil, you posted that thing of his Christmas wish that year of us winning the Champions League with, Madders and Ruben's goals and tap. You just think, what happened?
That's what I loved about him. It's more personal than anything else, but just the way he seemed to really invest himself in that season, and that I really loved that. And as sort of daft as it was, and he's obviously having a laugh and stuff, it was nice to have players thinking about a future with the club. And that kind of all fell down a month later when people like Madison leave, and then we lose a couple in a row, and everybody starts thinking, "Oh, we're not going to go up this season," and everything suddenly goes to pot. But that was him. He was a good guy, so he was the odd one out this season. We had three keepers, one of them had to go. Robbins has brought one of his own in, so it was just a straight choice between him and Burge, and Burge is a good keeper as well. I think Reece Charles-Cook is a good keeper, and I think Swindon have got someone very handy there, but it's football, isn't it? Someone has to go. So I just wish him well. I think he's a good, funny guy. You need someone who doesn't take life too seriously. Usually he is a goalkeeper, and just good on him. Really, I'm glad he can start playing football again. Hopefully.
I just think I'd be really happy if it turned out that Swindon did finish, second this season behind us, and that it turned out he'd had a really good season and got everything back on track. I'm sure will go. He's only young still, isn't he? I'm sure he'll do very well.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, he's probably not going to be first choice at Swindon. Their current goalkeeper, Lawrence Figurey, they signed for a pretty big fee from Liverpool last summer, and their fans rave about him. So I might be coming in as second choice.
Oh. What a strange move. I think
at least he's on the bench then.
Yeah. I get the impression that I think something had broken down between him and the club anyway, but I don't know that for definite. Okay, let's do a little bit of Shrewsbury then. New Tony scored.
He did, yeah. I like to think I had something to do with it because I shouted his name quite a lot.
Did you go for the full New Tony, or were you just shouting Tony?
I was just shouting Tone, actually, single syllable.
Okay.
And it evolved into everybody around me doing the same thing. It was. That's what I mean about that game being quite fun, because I accidentally won tickets to go and see it. There was an observer competition, and I retweeted it in like 30 seconds to spare, and inexplicably won these tickets. And then I found out it was very hard to persuade 4 separate people to come to that match. And eventually I managed to get people to come along with me. And when you sort of walk in and you realise the stadium's entirely empty as well, which was odd, because I watch the first team, so usually the first team games are somewhat busy. It was not busy, it was just one stand, and it was a very strange atmosphere. And the first half didn't make it easy for me to kind of justify why I dragged a few people to come along to watch it. And then somehow in the second half it flipped on its head, and it shouldn't really have, because then what happened is his first choice 11 that he put out, that was dismantled. So you had the injury to Kelly Evans, and Stevenson was struggling all in the first half as well. So things had to change again. He was forced into these substitutions, and yet we just seemed to look more coherent. I think much of that was down to the fact that New Tony was able to drop deeper, start to get a bit more time on the ball, look forward rather than always having his back to goal. And he was really the catalyst in that team, I felt, to us being able to sort of create some chances and ultimately start creating chances which led to the penalty, which I'm still not entirely sure it was a penalty. I think there was a foul outside the box first, and McNulty found a way to get himself that penalty. And I was very happy about that, because I was finally able to tweet my Mark McPenalty tweet, which I've had in my pocket for quite a while. So
I missed that.
That was handy.
That's very strong, yeah.
Yeah, it was favourite thing of the evening. And yeah, we got the goal in it. It kind of changed the tone of the game. The stands started to get a bit more lively. People started shouting Tony ever such a lot. It was just it was more interesting because we were finally in it. Because in the first half they scored 2 goals, kind of quick fire, very sloppy goals, no real resistance from us, and there was no sort of feeling within the ground that it was going to be anything more than a defeat. Second half it flipped on its head, and we were engaged in the match a lot more. And it's strange because sometimes the most low-key games become almost the most exciting. And it was an exciting match, and for no real sort of explainable reason, because it was a lesser team that we put out, and they still found a way to kind of come back into the game. And Tony's goal was fantastic. It showcased his quality brilliantly, just where he was able to keep his cool and put the ball into the top corner. And then when they got that bloke sent off, which again was purely down to the atmosphere, somehow we were able in the crowd to really start getting on the ref's back. And I don't think he even really saw the tackle, and while it was a little bit out of control, I don't think it was a red card. But the sheer sort of mentalness from the crowd when that tackle went in, it was really kind of vocal, and we almost forced that decision. The referee decided, okay, this guy's got to go. And I guess there are 2 disappointments from that match. The one that we weren't able to then push on. I think we kind of resigned ourselves to the fact that there was a lot of time left, and we probably would just score again without really doing anything to make it happen. And then the second disappointment was just the fact that we weren't able to see out the job till penalties. One thing I will do to kind of caveat that is it was a fantastic free kick that they scored. I mean, I only maybe once or twice a season give credit to the opposition. I'm very vengeful like that, and this was one time where I look at that goal and just think you don't save it. It was incredible free kick, and you kind of raise tip your hat to that and say fair play. You gone and scored a great goal, but it would have been fun to see that one out, just to kind of round off what wasn't. But we all went into it as a sort of an evening of we just kind of watch this match because we kind of have to, and it became a really enjoyable game, and we just didn't see the right end of the result. So, like you said earlier, Joe, it's not one that you can take too seriously. There were too many caveats in the performance. You've got kids playing, you've got sort of daft decisions. It was a bit of a pantomime of a match, really, and you can't read too much into it because, let's face it, we're not going to have the same team in the next match anyway. All you can do is kind of look at individuals and kind of start to gauge slightly better what you think of them.
Speaking of the next match, shall we move on and do some Chesterfield preview?
Yeah.
They're bottom of the league, is that right? On
Correct.
goal difference, yeah. A place that they were expected to be?
Not really. Sort of, while they're currently bottom of the division, I think they have been slightly unlucky in a few of their games, especially on the opening day against Grimsby, where they had about 30 shots against Grimsby's 5 and managed to lose 3-1. So, yeah, they have been slightly unlucky. I imagine they will move up the table as the season wears on. Just to note, though, that their manager, Gary Caldwell, has won just 3 of his games since arriving back in January. So there's pressure on him from the fans. And also there's a bit of a disharmonious relationship between the fans and the owners anyway. I'm not really sure why, but they just absolutely hate the owners. Sort of just one of those things where it's like you're not investing enough and we're losing games. So
It sounds familiar.
boycott. Yeah.
Yeah,
without knowing more about sort of the off-field situation about Chesterfield, I can't really speculate more on the specific reasons why, what grievances the fans have. But there is a bit of an atmosphere around the club, despite having a fairly strong squad for this division.
Players-wise, I mean, the one that catches the eye in terms of Cov connection is Ian Evert, who I always still think will come and play for us eventually because people have talked about it for so often. But he must be 38 now, maybe?
I think it's about 36.
So there's maybe still time then. But who else have they got in their team that we might have to look out for?
Well, I think their standout summer signing was Chris O'Grady, who has spent the past 6 seasons at the Championship, sort of not a particularly goal-scoring striker, but someone who can hold up the ball in attack and bring others into play. And based on that reputation alone, he's going to be someone to watch. Someone's going to offer real physical threat to our defence and sort of bring in more mobile and quicker players that Chesterfield have throughout the rest of their team. We've got Christian Dennis in attack, who had a reasonable season in League One after stepping up from the National League, and he's started the season in reasonably good form. He's sort of an off-the-shoulder striker, and sort of a penalty area type of striker who can sort of pop up with goals. One player who's really caught the eye this season from midfield is Jordan Sinnott, who they signed from Halifax, who were in the National League North last season. But he has looked a class apart this season, sort of this driving presence from midfield, who's added some goals and assists. So he's going to be someone we have to be wary of. We've also got 2 players who I really like just on reputation alone, and having seen them play a few times, not sure whether they started the season actually that well with Chesterfield, but I'm going to earmark them looking out for anyway. It's Louis Reed and Diego Girolamo. He's got a tough to pronounce name.
You did better than either of us would have done, and a million times better than Paul would have done if he was here.
Yeah, so Reed, I remember watching for Sheffield United a few seasons ago, and my jaw just dropped to the ground just watching his sort of technical abilities. He's only 5'6", but he's got such great control of the ball, can pick out a teammate, and I just think it's been injuries for him, which is why he hasn't kicked on. When he first broke through, he was being linked with Tottenham, and that was about 3 or 4 years ago. So if he can get going with them, he's going to be an absolute force at this level. Also, Mr. Diego, he's had a couple of good loan spells. He's another ex-Sheffield United player, actually. He did really well at Cheltenham last season on loan, where he scored. He had the creativity to the side which helped him stay up, and also did well at Northampton. So, yeah, watch out for those guys.
What about style of play and formation? What are we expecting there?
So Gary Caldwell loves his teams playing out from the back. It worked really well with Wigan when he had loads of money in League One. When he tried it at Chesterfield last season, it was absolutely disastrous. But just his philosophy on the game, sort of bringing youngsters into play, sort of possession-oriented style of football, he's still persisted with it, despite that leading to them finishing below us in the league last season. generally set up in a 3-5-2 formation, hoping sort of playing an extra man at the back will give them defensive protection. But they can still be caught out trying to play the ball out from the back.
And have you got a completely futile prediction?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Chesterfield can really click into gear, this is going to be a tougher match than expected. And I'm going to go back to my natural sort of home of pessimism and say we're going to lose this 2-1.
Ache. Okay. Good stuff. I was about to say bye to you just out of force of habit, but please stay if you would.
Okay.
In fact, we've got some questions for you, haven't we? First question from Twitter, and I will fill a little bit while I look for the person who has asked it. In fact, I will... Yeah, so Dilraj Johal has asked, does 4-2-3-1 suit the players that we have at the minute?
I mean, it's hard to say because right now we're not really sure sort of how to combine these sort of individuals that we have into a coherent formation. So I think it can work. I think our best 4 attacking players are Jody Jones, who, as Neil mentioned earlier, I'd like to see on the right too. Tony Andrew, maybe sort of playing just behind the striker or sort of driving from midfield, definitely. The Duck, who... Again, I want to see behind the striker, so I don't know how that Maris maybe playing Andreu in that sort of role, in a midfield role, just find Nazon with McNulty ahead of them, but then who plays on the left? I mean, whatever, still kind of looking for that balance.
And I think that might be it for Twitter questions. Have we got anything else before we wrap up? I feel like we've forgotten something.
Transfer deadline.
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? Of Reece and Tom Davies.
Yeah.
Would you expect more to happen, Neil, or were you hoping for more to happen?
I think, like everybody, we're hoping for one more attacking addition in some form. I alluded to it earlier, but I feel like, especially with the formation that we've got, we are missing that other winger. And while we can kind of earmark our Nazon, Vincenti, Kelly Evans, someone can play there. It doesn't feel the most comfortable for me. It doesn't feel the most natural for any of them. Kelly Evans, yeah, but he's raw. We're guessing. We don't really know what would happen if we were to put him in. So it's a bit of a punt. I just feel like with that additional winger, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with the ability to rotate and come up with a nicer formation around them. I know some people were talking about we're lacking in midfield as well. I think there's always an ideal. I think you always want more. But when you look at the numbers in the squad and you look at the ability of someone like Andrew to come back, Stevenson, Maycott showed himself to be a capable player the other day. I mean,
I like the look of him. From the little that I've seen of him, yeah.
He's
think there might
rangy.
be a player there, yeah.
I mean, I don't think... It's hard to know exactly what he is as a player, and I know we all love doing that. We want to have a strong idea in our mind, but there are bits and pieces in there which show that he could be quite a useful player to come in if we need him to come in. And that's always the key, isn't it? I mean, if we're saying that Kelly and Doyle are your 2 mainstays in midfield, you have the others around them to supplement them. And if you've got people like Stevenson to come in and do that, and Maycock can come in and do that, I guess where it becomes an issue is if you've got only Maycock and Stevenson together and there's not that tough bastard in the middle. That's when you potentially struggle. But then you've got Tony Andrew who's able to control the match from the middle of the park, it seems. So I feel like there are options in the middle. My main concern was just that extra wide player which we didn't seem to get over the line. And whether we can find a way to bring Baker in, I don't know. I mean, I can take or leave it with Baker. He seems a worthwhile acquisition if we could bring him in, but I don't think we really know, after having not seen him for the last few years, quite where he is career-wise.
No, quite. My first choice would have been an absolute Hulk in central midfield, but I think I always want that. But overall, I don't think you can complain too much about a transfer window where you've signed 13 players. I just think there's got to be a bit of a critical mass when it comes to incomings. Maybe the key is to let some of them bed in and remember that there'll be another frantic transfer window in 6 months' time. Okie doke, right, let's wrap that up.
And there's always the focus on that last game, isn't there?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Let's wrap this up with one
Everybody
final...
wants that.
One final question then. Neil, if you're only going to read one blog this weekend, where would you go to?
There's a little blog, Joey, called skybluesblog.co.uk.
Okay.
I think people should look at it.
And Dominic, same question to you. If people are only going to look at one blog this weekend, where should they go?
I mean, I was going to say my own blog, but I also thought it was worth mentioning this guy called CCFC, spelled phonetically, who's done some really good statistical blogs that have been really impressive, actually. So look out for that. I'm not sure what the website address is, but he's on Twitter. Remind
us of yours, and I'll have a look it up.
My website is sidebysammy.wordpress.com, and I'm on Twitter at Sammy.
I can't find this chat, but if you search for CCFC...
Yeah, C as in the C.
Yeah, as in the C, phonetically, you'll find him. Okay, I think that's everything from us then, so thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you, boys.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you.
And thank you, listener. Bye.